Hey everybody, this is Kayla with Goddess Angel Divination. So today I do have a different kind of video for you. So I'm just being guided to just read a story on my channel. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. So this is the book called Magical Beasts in the Enchanted World. Okay, so the Enchanted World, Magical Beasts. Okay. So, Chapter 1, Vestiges of the Elder Days. 40 centuries ago, when most of the world was a wilderness wandered by barbarian tribes and haunted by strange and savage beings, the castle of Crete set a precious stone in the sapphire seas of Greece, gave gave rays to the kingdom for seafaring princes and treasure filled palaces. Even there, however, nature was not fully subdued, and survivors of a disordered elder age lurked amid the magnificence. It happened once that a Cretan queen named Pasiphae gave birth to a monster, a male infant with a bull calf's head. Certainly, this was no offspring of the king's, because its mother was royal. However, it could not be destroyed. It might otherwise have happened at wait. However, it cannot be destroyed as might otherwise have happened. The queens of Crete had specifically had specially wait, the queens of Crete had specially sanity when they were thought to be daughters of the great goddess, she of 100 names and faces, destroyer and giver of life, mistress of the moon and tide, whom Creteans worshipped. Their land's very name derived from her. It meant ruling goddess. The queen's husband, who bore the title of Minos, therefore had a prison made deep within his citadel at Sinos in the east. And in it he hid the beast child. Right? This is the centaur, the beast child. And in it he hid the beast child. Some say some said that he imprisoned Queen Pasiphae there too. In any event, she disappeared not long after the birth. Although her daughters the lived on at the palace under Minos' watchful eye, years passed and life continued as before the arrival of the monster. The king's black-sailed ships patrolled the seas of Greece, and even the mainland kingdoms sent tribute to him in his island palace. The palace itself was a monument of his greatness. It towered in a cleft. It towered in a cleft where the Cretan mountain swept down. That's beautiful. Where the Cretan mountain swept down to the sea, and it was unfolded. Oh, and it was unfortified. Minos' ruler of the seas had no need of protective walls. Instead, tier upon tier, with white stone chambers, sunny courtyards, bright pavilions, and sweeping stairways served as a stage for the suave and graceful ceremonies of Cretan court. Yet there was a sense of hovering darkness too. There was a sense of hovering darkness too. Before the tiled roofs and the forest of crimson columns soared a stockstone emblem. The carved horns of a enormous bull, the ancestral animal of the Cretan house, and far from the airy royal chambers where painted dolphins danced in glowing seas and images of lilies glided glided the walls. Far from the storerooms with their treasures of oil, wine, grain, and gold down along the seldom visited corridor, there was a massive door. From this portal, the beast's prison twisted deep into the earth's miles of lightless corridors that curled and withered upon themselves to make a fathomless maze. Within this maze, shuffling aimlessly through its internal light, lived the monster, which was called the Minotaur, or the Bull of Minos. When it reached its full growth, its massive head was that of a bull, crescent-horned and covered with a coarse hair, matted from the splitted, matted from the spittle, and dribbled from the blackened lips into its dewlap. Its body was a human figure, powerfully built, with legs thickened by a lifetime of wearing its burden of bearing the burden of its great head. While the hours and days and years rolled by, and the busy life of maritime princes bustled above its cavern, the Minotaur lived a mole's life in darkness and silence. It was always alone. It did not speak. It could not. For the most part, it ate small cave creatures, rats, insects, lizards. It would hear them scuttling and would catch their scent. When it rumbled in the throat and went hunting, then it rumbled in its throat and went hunting. The Minotaur was always a successful predator. Besides knowing every curve and cranny of its territory, it had something of a man's cunning. It also had a great strength, which served for those rare occasions when people entered this maze and might partake in human flesh. Such feasts are rare but regular. Since the earliest days of their civilization, Cretans had offered sacrifices, slaves, or captives of war to their goddess at the turn of the great year. It This occurred every ninth year. The date was determined by cycles of the planet Venus, when it appeared as the morning star, one of the great goddesses, many faces. At one time, the victims had been dispatched by the Labyrinth, a double-headed axe that was still to be seen in the ritual chambers of Minos citadel. Now, by order of the king, the Minotaur served as a living axe, and the beast's prison came to be called the Labyrinth. Within this maze, no mortal could last long, even if the victims kept sufficiently still to avoid rousing the beast. They ultimately they they ultimately starved one way or another. The Minotaur got the bodies in the end and feasted on the flesh and sucked the marrow from the bones. As long as it did so, the people said the Cretan ships remained full sailed, and and the Cretan ships remained full sails, the grooves heavy laden on the granaries overflowing, right? And so it happened during this spring of the Cretan war, and so it happened during the spring of the Cretan year, when the chill rains and ceases, when the chill rains and ceased, and Venus sparkled in the rosy dawn, that Crete began preparing for the festival of the sacrifice. The, the, the fields were plowed, and the black earth lay warming in the sun, ready for the seed. In the olive groves, small, cunningly jointed dolls, hopefully offerings for the great goddess, hung among the boughs j- and jinged like live things with each breath of wind. In a palace courtyard, the king's daughter, Ariande, turned gravely on the mosaic dancing floor, whose decoration guided the convoluted steps to her ritual dance. The floor itself was patterned after the brushwood mazes used for trapping the prejudice that the dance was named for. The wooden mazes used for trapping the prestigious that the dance was made for. In a chamber frecoast with griffins, Minos gave order and waited for word that the victims had arrived. And in the depths of the labyrinth, the Minotaur wandered. The sacrificial victims came one April by water from Athens. 7 youths and 7 maidens had been promised, chosen by lot to serve as tribute to Minos from the half barbarian kingdom in Attica on the mainland. All the palace people went down to the quay at the port of Sonos to greet them was at the custom. As was the custom. Okay? Brown-haired Adarine stood there on the stones among the palace priestesses in their tiered skirts and shaking armbands. Minos waited near her, surrounded by the young men of his court.